Bonjour, Sherry. How are you?
Ah, bonjour, comment ça va?
Very
Good.
good.
Good
Welcome.
man. Good man.
Welcome to LARVOL Friends, our weekly podcast. The LARVOL Group is inviting a friend of ours every week to talk about various topics having to do with sometimes AI in healthcare, sometimes medical affairs, various aspects of our industry. And today we're going to talk about your career and your experience in the healthcare industry, in the pharmaceutical industry. We know each other for a couple of years now, and it's been a pleasure to interact with you. So, for our audience, could you give us a little bit of a background on your professional journey, Sherry?
Perfect. Thank you, Bruno, for inviting me. I really appreciate this. And yes, the world of LinkedIn is wonderful, and that's how we connected and have kept in contact. And I am just thrilled to be a part of this. So thank you. I am actually an international person living in Dallas. I've actually grown up and was born in Canada, just north of Toronto, and went to business school in Canada and then moved down to Philadelphia, where I really started my true pharmaceutical career with Bristol Myers Squibb. And then I moved to Pfizer and actually had a great experience with Pfizer. Pfizer's like getting your MBA in healthcare sales. They're intense, they're great. I launched Viagra, I launched Lipitor, I launched Norvasc, I launched big drugs in the industry outside of oncology. And then I got moved to Bristol Myers Squibb Oncology. A friend of mine was in the specialty field in Bristol Myers Squibb, and she said, "You would love oncology." And that was back in 1997. So I've been in oncology, and Bristol Myers Squibb at the time was like the king of the hill in oncology. And I stayed there just for a couple of years. And then, weirdly enough, I was taken with the internet explosion back in 99, and my husband is my boyfriend at the time, and 4 friends started their own internet company, and that's why I'm really into tech and health tech as well right now with my experience, in a startup internet company where I was national sales manager and got to experience the computer and got to know the inner workings of the internet world. And but that didn't last too long because our VC funds dried up with the internet burst and the bubble bursting. So I went back into oncology. This time I went to Roche Oncology and stayed with them for a couple of years in Philadelphia. And then from a development standpoint, I was next in line to become a manager of teams, and the very first state that came open was Texas. And I took the job to manage the Texas team, which I didn't realize how big Texas was. It's huge. And I had never stepped foot in Texas. I took the job for the experience, and they said, just 2 years of development, and then you can come back up to Philly, New Jersey area and continue your development. And after 2 years, I got the phone call, "Okay, Sherry, it's time to come back up to New Jersey and continue your development." And I said, "No way. I love it here in Texas." And so I've been now in Texas for 21 years in oncology in various roles. I was with Roche and managed the MD Anderson team and the Texas Oncology team, which are the largest. That's MD Anderson, of course, is the largest academic center in the country and globally renowned. And then Texas Oncology is the largest community oncology group in the USA as well. They're part of USO Network, but they are the largest. So I got an experience that not many managers get in Texas with managing a large community based group and a very large academic group. So I got to know my KOLs pretty well. I then went from Roche Oncology to Novartis Oncology in '04. Moved there in multi different roles, sales management. I was the first key account manager calling on C-suite with big accounts across the country, was in market access, calling on insurance companies. So I got to experience the difficulty of the insurance world. And then I moved. My last role with pharmaceuticals was as a thought leader liaison, which is your KOL developer, your relationships with KOLs. And I had Penn State, and I was the first to do that role as well with Novartis. Then I decided to retire from pharmaceuticals and go into consulting. So I started my own consulting company called OncoConnects. And the reason for that, I felt I had obviously a lot of connections in the oncology world. And these small biotechs, mid-sized biotechs could really benefit from someone who knows the who's who and start to get into the go-to-market mode probably more quickly with their sales group, marketing group. But then I got pulled into an awesome opportunity, and that was a friend of mine said, "I want you to work for me at McKesson for USO Network Group." It's their data house called Ontada. And I became the VP of the small to mid-sized biotech team. And that was quite an experience learning the data side and the vendor side, the customer side, and the RWE operations and whatnot of the data they collect through their EMR. Spent some time there, but then I decided I was doing 15 hours a day. There, I decided I don't want to work that long a day anymore. I want to be able to get back out in the industry as my CEO of OncoConnect and make my mark. And then another friend of mine, this is where your connections come in, right? Your network, called me. He's a breast cancer oncologist and a KOL in lung cancer as well, and said, "I'm starting up this new oncology IT platform, and it's called PrecisCa. And we'd like you to consult with us and be a part of the team to bring PrecisCa to the forefront. We're a second opinion platform for oncologists, KOLs, globally and nationally. We also provide education and content. They've got over 1,700 videos on their website with KOLs sharing updates and educating on each disease state that's out there. And they also involve oncology fellows to review cases. When we do a second opinion with a patient, the data and the case support goes to the oncology fellow. That's where I'm at right now. I've been with PrecisCa now for almost a year. And Anna asked me what my most favorite role has been to date. And everything's been different in my career. And I'm just so happy to be able to have had opportunities to start new positions. But you know what? I've made these connections by working hard and getting out there, getting on a plane 2 to 3 times a week, working 21 weekends a year at all these meetings. As Bruno, you're at so many meetings as well. You make those connections and you develop your own network and your trust with these key opinion leaders. So that's where I'm at right now.
I did not want to interrupt you because I feel that for anybody listening, just hearing you describe your career, the decisions you made, is very interesting. And if I were early in my career, I would look at that and I would find inspiration in how you pursued your interest, made decision along the way. And I would want to ask you the following question. And it whether or not whether or not you would do anything differently, what kind of advice would you have to a younger self or someone else listening to us today at various stages of their career and sometimes feeling maybe even stuck or maybe sometimes burn out in their position or wondering what to do next. So any either principle or general suggestions that you would have to our listeners.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Bruno. And like I had mentioned, I covered many states and then I was working like 15 hours a day. Through COVID, when I was working, it was a 15-hour day on camera and whatnot. I think you really have to love what you're doing and have passion. And the minute you don't is the minute I think you've got to pivot to something else, because it really shows with your customers and your internal customers with your company if you're not enjoying what you're doing. I feel like if you really embrace what you're doing and have passion, opportunities come to you and people can feel that. But I think that you really do have to recognize your body and understand when you need rest, when you need a break, and be honest with your internal customer, which is your company, if you are not having fun at what you're doing and having to take a step back, or maybe moving positions and saying, "Hey, I would really like another challenge. I think in this position, I've done what I need to do and I need a new challenge. I can move forward and take a risk," but make sure that you are open and honest with yourself first, and then with your internal colleagues and bosses at your company, secondly. But also make sure that in your career that you are working hard for yourself, that you are making the connections and you are building your own value. Because as over the last 25 odd years, companies hire and then they will let you go. I was never part of a downsizing, knock on wood, like back then, but many of my colleagues were. And the network is so important with your colleagues and your KOLs and your customers. So that if you ever are in that position where you're forced to make a change, it's easier. And LinkedIn, I think, is the best tool right now for business, and be a part of LinkedIn and be consistent on that. But yeah, really pay attention to yourself and be honest.
I'd like to talk a little bit about networking. I think some people are natural networkers. They are there. They love to go to conferences. They work the room. They love to be on LinkedIn. They connect with a lot of people. Others maybe are not natural networkers. And for them, maybe they don't fully understand why, or it's just not their personality. What advice would you have to that group of people who are not necessarily natural networker? And you touched on the value in being your career recession proof, or if you're laid off, you have ways to find new opportunities. But any other advice for people? Maybe we need to nurture themselves into being more in a networking mode, so to speak.
Yeah, great question. There's some people that are more extroverted, of course, and introverted in this business, but I find more salespeople are more extroverts. They're easier to network. The marketing teams I find are more introverted, that are in house and don't get out as much. But I think you really need to look at LinkedIn and see who has a lot of followers and connect with them and message them and ask them, "Hey, how'd you get so many followers?" Or how do you network? What's important to you? And how did you start building your followers? Social media, Twitter as well, and it may not be a colleague in the industry and pharmaceutical industry. It even could be a doctor. I connected with you. You have such an interesting background and very future oriented. I'm very interested in that. So I network with you. So whatever you're interested in, make sure you reach out. And I guess that's the only thing I can suggest, is that you have to put yourself out there right now in the internet environment, with social media, LinkedIn, if you are really dedicated and motivated. You really have to put yourself out there now, whether you like it or not. And when you work your meeting, do your research up front. So when you go to a meeting, you know who the KOLs look like. And with your conference planners as well, with Larval for pharma, they're invaluable as well to know who's speaking where, who's attending. I think that's invaluable too, that you need to find your resources to help you network. Hope that helps.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. It does to me. So now shifting topic a little bit to medical affairs and key opinion leaders and the type of work you've done in the medical affair world. What are the trends that you've seen? And in the past, you and I talked about digital key opinion leaders and also the role of the metaverse. We talked about virtual reality and how in our company we use virtual reality as our office, but this is still very early. What are the trends in the KOL field right now?
The KOL field, I feel like there's two different types of physicians out there right now. The KOLs that have been out there for years, that have so much experience, and they're very well known nationally and internationally, but they're going to retire soon. And they are within 5 to 8 years of retirement. And I have known these KOLs for 25 years and built relationships with them. It's hard to build relationships with them when you're just coming in new. I think the trend is that in the pharmaceutical industry, they're building thought leader liaison groups now with the Med Affairs group and also in marketing and sales. That is a different level than sales, and it's a different level than MSL. It's KOL development. And that's really making a helpful impact for pharmaceutical companies to build better relationships with their KOLs. Not many of the pharmaceutical companies have these thought leader liaisons, but that's definitely the trend internally for corporate America, corporate pharma. The small biotechs are still not there yet with KOL development, and they've got to understand that that's really super important. The KOLs, you need to utilize resources like you have and find out where they're speaking, where they're going, and follow them and get to know them face to face or try to connect them virtually or find someone that knows them, like myself, online or that can be your connector to help connect with the older KOLs. They're more apt to connect with you and help and be your speaker for an ad board or a speaker for your disease state updates or your FDA new approvals or go to market. Where the trend is right now too is where we're forgetting is the oncology fellow right now. That's first, second, third year in academia. And that is hard because the academic fellow isn't allowed to talk to pharma. So you have to get to the oncology fellow. And when I was able to 20 years ago talk to fellows, once you know a fellow for life. But right now they can't talk to you. Getting to know the oncology fellows as well is really important. And going to these events and trying to find them is also important.
I've got a question about that. Then I want to go back to I guess, the difference between KOL development and a traditional field medical and MSL. But regarding the fellows, you can still meet them at conferences, right? You just cannot go to the institutions and visit them. So I guess conferences is a great way to meet KOL fellows. And I get your point that if you can build a relationship with someone early in their career, where they don't have a network yet. These relationships are very different and long lasting. So that's a great point. QL development, what does it mean? And how different is it from a standard MSL role?
So the MSL will be more apt to talk to the KOL from a clinical standpoint and develop relationships with the KOL to do clinical research and give them updates where the marketing and sales team cannot talk to them in that way from a compliance standpoint. Pretty much marketing and sales is really limited to the PI for drugs and talking from the PI, but MSLs can speak to different analysis, retrospective, prospective, et cetera. And so it's really good to really team up with your MSL So you know what they're talking about, where some gaps are, where you can fill in and get to know. Or you might be able to introduce the MSL if you're marketing and sales side and the MSL doesn't know the KOL to start the relationship. You really need to network with internally as well with your company to to put your hand up and go, "Hey, I'm the one who has a relationship here. I can help you. I can be the driver of that to help us from a medical side and a marketing side." Oh, I can't hear you, Bruno.
Are the KOL now increasingly on social media? And are you allowed in a pharma company to somehow be active with them, if not engage with them on social media?
Very difficult from a compliance standpoint. We are very limited on LinkedIn and social media and what we can share or say. So it's highly compliant. Now you can like what they're doing, maybe reach out to them and ask them, can I have an appointment? If they're on social media, reach out and message them. That's about the extent of that. It's really, really difficult. Marketing is making more inroads on Twitter and LinkedIn with advertising and whatnot. But yeah, it's really hard.
But you can direct message them, right? You just cannot. I assume that's feasible because that's the equivalent of an email through another channel. But you cannot publicly post, or even maybe in some cases repost, or maybe even like their posting. Is that correct in
Yes,
most organizations?
you can repost something that's approved by the company on LinkedIn or even Twitter. You can't develop your own taglines or you can't say the brand name and then the disease state together. So there's a lot of rules. It's really tough. Even to direct message a physician is just like an email, and you're still regulated to the compliance rules of email, even in a direct message. You can't say, I want to talk to you about this drug for breast cancer. That's not allowed.
That would be, that's right. That would be, or even if it's a approved indication of that drug. Okay. Yes. So that's part of
Correct.
the compliance training.
Yes.
Yes. We're in a very compliance heavy industry, and the medical affair in particular. So we're getting toward the end of our time together today. And the way we like to end these is to ask our guests to formulate some type of takeaway that they would like to share with our audience. It could be about, again, what you learn in your career. It could be about what are the trend of the future in our industry, in KOL engagement, in medical affairs in general. How would you end our time together today with a takeaway?
Yeah, well, thank you, Bruno. I think it's just imperative to go to every meeting you can and meet people face to face because there's nothing that beats a face to face interaction and introduction. If you are at home, get on LinkedIn and see what's going on, ask a lot of questions, meet different people, and continue to update yourself on what is happening and keep up. Even with Chat GPT, what you're doing with the metaverse, everything, try to stay on top of the trends and the future because it is going so fast right now. It's hard to keep up, but keep your network up and it'll help you.
I was wondering if we would mention ChatGPT in this call, and you did. And of course, that's a technology wave that took us by storm. Are you using ChatGPT yourself?
Yes, yes. And I'm learning about it every week. And I'm old school. When I went to university, we didn't even have a computer. But it's helping me learn, but it's doing things faster for me that I never ever expected.
Just a small point on that. I was looking at some cancer data with my team a few days ago, and I asked a very specific question, thinking now, if ChatGPT is not going to be able to help, I asked in non-small cell lung cancer, is immuno-oncology working when you've got a EGFR mutation? I thought, well, yeah, it's not going to know. He's not going to even understand what I'm talking about. And I was amazed at the quality of the answer. And of course, this technology is weeks old, right? It went from nothing to 100 million users in weeks, November 22 weeks, months. So it's incredible. And so if you're listening and if you're not using ChatGPT, it's a very important technology to learn and to put in practice. And it might help you in many surprising ways. Sherry, thank you very much for being the guest of on LARVOL and Friends this week. And we hope to have you another time as well.
Thank you, Bruno. And thank you to your team. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. They're wonderful. Goodbye.
Bye bye.